Hey, it's Drybear. Another week has come and went, so it's time to check in on the healing rankings for Dragonflight Season 1, Week 9. We'll look at all the healing specializations stacked up together in all forms of PvE content and compare it to the numbers that we saw last week. As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. Starting off, this is where we were last week. Now remember that we had a hotfix that went live that reduced the healing overall for Restoration Druid by 3% and Preservation Evoker by 5%. And based on these numbers, these are from Warcraft logs, the overall performance for the healers, you can see why. We also did get a buff for Holy Priest and for Restoration Shaman, and Mistweaver was doing better since 10.0.5. So we'll see how these changes have, the changes that we saw in the hotfix, how those impacted the healers going into week 9. And here we are, the end of week numbers for week 9, the healers in Dragonflight Season 1. So you can see that Preservation and Restoration actually did see a score decrease in several areas. That overall healing reduction did have an impact on them, although it wasn't as big as you'd see from DPS classes in a 5% increase or reduction overall. So they're still in the top rank. They're still conquering. You can see that, well, let's go through each one of them overall, ranked top to bottom. Preservation Evoker is still in the first slot. They are in first for Mythic Raid and for Mythic Plus. They still out heal every class in the game, and that 5% healing reduction plus the temporal anomaly changes in both the hotfix last week and the 10.0.5 changes hasn't been enough to knock them out of that slot. And I think partially because they have so much control over their burst healing when they use their empowered abilities, and they can store things up. Their toolkit is just so elegant and effective and powerful. And the healer has a lot of control over when those things go off, which makes them very strong. They did take second in Heroic Raid. And remember, I include Heroic Raid rather than just Mythic Raid because not only is the group size not constrained, but also people tend to take the classes to their limits in Heroic, specifically healers, because you can 2-heal a 20-man, for example, and there's going to be a lot more healing needed than you would if you had 4 healers or 5 healers. So you can very easily give healers a much bigger parse if you under-heal based on your composition, and it shows what the classes are capable of when they have less restrictions on them, like high Mythic Plus keys or Mythic Raid, where you have a fixed group size and everyone has to do mechanics. So Restoration Druid, still the number 1 in Heroic Raid, just gets to pump tons and tons and tons of rejuves and heals all across the board, but it wasn't enough for them to take the first place slot overall this week, though they are still close. And it's kind of interesting to see, even with a 5% reduction on Preservation and a 3% reduction on Restore Druid, they're still a cut above everything else. They are standard deviations away from the other data sets here for the other specializations and still at the top. Second place is Resto Druid. They are second in Mythic Raid and Mythic Plus, though not too far behind, and they are just right up there for Heroic Raid. So you can see that, yeah, they're still kicking. So if you're playing Resto Druid or Preservation main, it doesn't look like the nerfs had a major detriment to their positioning overall. Holy Priest did take third overall, primarily because they're insane parses in Heroic Raid this week. They did get a 3%, I believe, increase to their healing overall going into the reset, which was super nice and helped them bump up a bit, but they are still struggling in Mythic Plus, which is pretty obvious. I think in general, they just tend to be too squishy, and they have a lot of casting, kind of similar to Resto Shaman, but with less utility. They have a lot of casting they need to do, and this season specifically, there's a ton of dungeons that require constant movement. Algathar, Nakud, all of them, they just need a lot of movement while you're playing. Even like Quarter Stars, stuff like that. Some of the encounters are just very movement heavy, which doesn't favor Holy Priest in the slightest. Mythic Raid, Holy Priest is towards the bottom and actually parsing about the same as Holy Paladin and just behind Restoration Shaman, but nowhere near the utility that those two classes bring. So you'd like to see Holy Priest higher up in the HPS just throughput requirement, just because they don't bring the same kind of value that Resto Shaman and Holy Paladin does. Underneath Holy Priest is actually Mistweaver. They have, since the change when they got Shadowlands Gift, they ended up getting some really, really cool throughput in Raid. It didn't seem to have much impact on Mythic Plus for them. Doesn't mean you can't clear keys, but they are, and have been since the start of Season 1, the worst Mythic Plus healer. Either they are going full fist weaving, and when mobs move or healing gets really far behind, fist weaving has trouble keeping up with crisis mode, where they kind of have to attack a mob and hope that Rising Sun Kick does enough and things stack together. Or if you're going the caster style, they tend to run out of mana, or they struggle to keep up with the pacing of the fight. But they do quite well in Raid. Since they got Shadowlands Gift back from Legion and they got some buffs several times in a row, they're actually doing pretty well in Heroic Raid and Mythic Raid, and even taking the 3rd place slot in Mythic Raid this week. So throughput is doing well. They do have some fixes coming for Shadowlands Gift to make it not do as much AoE, which is kind of shocking that they would be so quick to nerf that, considering they're still underperforming relative to Resto Druids and Preservation Evoker, and they just got the skill in 10.0.5, and we'll see if those go through if they haven't already, the nerfs that they have planned for Shadowlands Gift, but overall, that did hit there. Underneath Mistweaver is Restoration Shaman. They did get a whole bunch of buffs in the hotfix last week, and they are getting a whole bunch of changes in 10.0.7. A lot, probably more than any other class in the game, and we'll see kind of where they stack up in 10.0.7. I'm kind of shocked. There's so many changes. Chain Heal is going to get a lot more value and a lot more play time, and they also just got some crazy throughput buffs in the last hotfix, and that throughput helped them tremendously. In Heroic Raid, their HPS and performance is up relative to last week. They benefited greatly from that. They're actually up in Mythic Plus, and they're up in Mythic Raid as well. I think that they probably could stand to get a little bit more buff, but maybe we'll see how that comes through in the next big content update. Maybe we'll even see them climb up. Typically, Restoration Shaman, you'd want to see them a little bit lower than some of the throughput healers, but not by much, because they are a throughput healer, but they do bring a lot of utility that none of the other healers can relative to the toolkit that Resto Shaman has. Underneath Resto Shaman is Holy Paladin, and this, you probably want to see them a little bit higher. They are doing incredibly well in Mythic Plus. Not only are they super tanky, which is useful in Mythic Plus, they can eat and block some mechanics, they can bubble themselves, but they also have blessings that make a lot of the dungeons in this particular season, Season 1, a lot more manageable, because they can bop people, they can keep people safe, they can get some really big heals and some spot heals, and with good management, they can stack people up. They're just not doing as much throughput on the raid front. And I think part of that is okay. In general, Holy Paladin is best, in my opinion. I've been healing for a long time. Holy Paladin is best used as a spot healer and as a tank healer. They prevent individual deaths. They don't, top everybody up. Like Legion and BFA, we had some abilities for Holy Paladin that allowed them to do some crazy raid healing, but their toolkit is better suited for spot healing and tank healing, which means their overall HPS is going to be lower, but you definitely lose more and wipe more without a Holy Paladin, which is generally why it's okay if their HPS is lower compared to everyone else. They could probably stand to get a little bit of a buff or maybe some benefits that help them in the raid environment, because they probably maybe just need a little bit of love there, but they're doing just fine in Mythic Plus, and they still provide the value that they always have, which is a good sign for them. They do have some changes coming in the next update that might move around their Divine Toll and remove Seraphim and things like that. But until that goes live, we'll see that. I think they're still experimenting with those ideas. And dead last is Discipline. I don't know what's going on with Discipline. I don't know why it took them so long to make changes to Discipline for 10.0.5, and then it's been kind of all quiet on the Western Front ever since. Discipline still struggles significantly in Raid, although for the first time, I think they're not last in Heroic Raid. They're beating Holy Paladins. They got some nice buffs going into 10.0.5 that affected their direct healing, Flash Heal, Renew, Power, Radiance, but they didn't really see anything that affected their Atonement too much, which is their primary raid heal that you'd like to see improved. But that direct healing did help them tremendously in Mythic Plus, and they're actually doing pretty decently in Mythic Plus, just not so great in Raid overall. So I probably want to see them come up. They're definitely not as much of a utility healer as Resto Shaman or Holy Paladin, so you would hope to see them higher, but maybe not to the same level as Spirit Shell once was back in the day. So that's where the healers are week 9. It looks like the nerfs for Preservation, Restoration, Druid didn't do too much to their standing. Holy Priest got some love, but it didn't affect them in Mythic Plus in the way that probably should have. Mistweaver, the Shadowlands gift was a great change. It helped them out a lot in Raid, and maybe they just need a lot more love in Mythic Plus to keep up with that. Resto Shaman buffs were effective, and they've got more on the way. So, you know, Resto Shaman stonks are in the sky. Holy Paladin is still struggling a little bit in Heroic Raid, but they do their job so well that maybe that's okay. And I think Discipline probably still needs some atonement buffs to help them stack up. But let me know what your thoughts are down below in the comment section. What healers do you think need changes, and what are those changes right now? Or how do you feel about the standings for week 9? As always, if you have any questions or comments for me, you'll find me live every day on twitch.tv/Drybear. Come by and say hi. If you enjoyed yourself today, leave a like down below. You can support me and my work on Patreon and view Patreon exclusive content, link in the description. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you in the next one.